Coming up on Maine Challenge, members of Mainers for Accountable Leadership. Hello, and welcome to Maine Challenge, a production of Lincoln County Indivisible and Lincoln County Television. Our guests today are the leadership team of Mainers for Accountable Leadership. Very important group at this important critical time. Our guests are Marie Folliter, Gordon Adams, and Jackie McNeil. Let's start with you, Marie. How did the group get started, and what's the plan?
Thank you, Chuck. Not a big question there at all. So we began soon after the election of Trump in a Facebook group, Pantsuit Nation Maine. Deanie Mers, April Humphrey, Gordon Adams, and I sort of coalesced and began outlining expectations of our elected officials, that they be accessible, hold a town hall, that they be transparent, announce how they vote, that they be leaders, speak up, speak out, and stand up in moments of crisis like this. Quickly, we began mobilizing on multiple issues, and we've been grateful to be partners with so many, both across the state and across the country. We are focusing, obviously, on the defeat of Senator Susan Collins. We are also focusing on ensuring that no Supreme Court justice is confirmed until after a smooth transition of power, the election of a new president and Congress. And we are also gearing up to protect the results, ensuring that the results of our election are respected. No small task that will take all of us and the biggest coalition effort you can possibly imagine.
That's a tall order. How did you get into this, Gordon?
Well, I moved to the state of Maine about 5 years ago, bought a house 8 years ago. So I live in Brunswick, Maine, moved out of Washington, D.C., got out of town, I guess you would say, just in time, and ran into my friend Deanie Mertz up here in the state of Maine. And she said, hey, you know, April Humphrey and Marie Folliter and I are getting a group together that's going to focus specifically on the 4 federal candidates. That's going to focus, as Marie said, specifically on accountability, on transparency, on holding themselves to the highest standards that Mainers expect from their federal officials. So I joined up with them shortly after Trump was elected president. And we have been actively involved in virtually every major political issue that you can imagine affecting federal officials for the last 3.5 years. And as Marie says, it's become much more urgent than it ever was, both to get rid of Susan Collins and to ensure that the election takes place with reasonable transparency, with reasonable effectiveness, and with an outcome that can in fact be implemented. So we're enthusiastic about reinforcing what is right now a seriously challenged democratic political process.
Understand. And Jackie, how did you get into this adventure?
Well, like I think everybody involved, probably I was in shock and dismay after the 2016 election, in large measure because the situation we're in right now, I could see happening. I could see the fall of democracy, the fall of our institutions like the DOJ and the CDC. I mean, who would have thought? But I could see that happening in our future and needed to get involved as soon as possible. And I have 2 children who I just adore, and I don't want them to have to grow up in this world that we are in right now. And so that's why I got involved. I'm a historian by training, and so I look at everything through a historical lens. And I recognize that we are in a place of crisis that we have not really been in before. And it's very important that people recognize that and do everything they can to get involved.
Very true. I think I became aware of the Mainers for Accountable Leadership around the time of the Kavanaugh nomination. I don't know if that supercharged your efforts or just my attention. But did that play a role, Marie?
Absolutely. We partnered with Be a Hero and Maine People's Alliance in what was the first of its kind in a tactic. Senator Collins, vote no on Kavanaugh or we will fund your future opponent. $4 million later, 3.9 of it transferred to our now Democratic nominee, Sarah Gideon. We sort of polarized the base around a vote, and in that highlighted some of the reasons that Senator Collins is no longer accountable to the people. People could not, fathom this woman who says she's pro-choice while appointing someone who's anti-choice to the U.S. Supreme Court. And certainly we, with a viral campaign like that and incredible partners, we did sort of catapult in a different way to the national and state stage. That being said, we were fighting before and we're fighting after. And now our focus is phone banking, text banking, letters to the editor, communication strategy, digital strategy, and reminding every Mainer that Susan Collins does not represent them.
The role of Mitch McConnell seems to be getting larger every day. And those of us who were paying attention understand that Senator Collins has been pretty much a loyal lieutenant. And I assume the reports are true that when she's parted ways with McConnell and company, she's done it with their blessing. What kind of force is he among Maine voters in the Collins, who are I know there are very few undecideds in the Collins-Gideon race, Savage, Lynn, but what role does McConnell play in the voters' view of this election? Gordon.
Well, I would say that if you will, Senator McConnell is the Svengali of the campaign. He's a very clever politician who is very careful about what he says, doesn't make wild statements, unlike the president, holds his powder dry when he needs to, seriously helps fund the Republican Party, is dedicated to maintaining his leadership and a Senate majority. And as a result, I think your reading, Chuck, is absolutely right. That is to say, Susan Collins gets to look like an independent when Mitch McConnell has the votes. If you think the telephone wires aren't humming between Collins and McConnell, you're making a very large mistake. Her independence, her vaunted independence, is pretty much of a charade in the state of Maine. And there are very, very few places where she steps up against McConnell when McConnell is going to lose something if she does. She's very good at standing up and being independent, as she's being at the moment, looking independent with respect to the confirmation of a Supreme Court justice. But at the same time, there only being two Republicans who are going to stand up in that position and try to prevent a vote. It doesn't matter because McConnell clearly has the votes that he needs. And that's a classic kind of pattern with Collins. You know, she went to the Senate as somebody who proclaimed herself an independent Maine type Republican. She has not shown up as that, especially not in this, her last term. And the Kavanaugh vote in particular is a classic indication of that. The 45-minute floor speech that she gave was ridiculous and utterly unpersuasive. But she went on for 45 minutes, you know, having heard and respected what the victim of Kavanaugh's sexual assault, alleged sexual assault was, she nonetheless turned in her vote to Mitch McConnell. So the nexus, the knot between her and McConnell is extremely close. But because of the challenges of running in Maine, it's important for her to try to look like she's independent. What that has meant in this term, particularly with things like her vote on the tax bill, which rewarded wealthy people and among other things, stripped the pre-existing condition clause out of the Affordable Care Act, something that she said she supports and actually voted to support. She's basically allowed the guts to be taken out of it going along with him. Her vote on impeachment and her statements on impeachment, including the ridiculously laughable statement that he learned his lesson. It's quite obvious ever since the impeachment vote that the only lesson he's learned is that, the assertion of autocratic tendencies works for him so far. So she has not been able to step back from him. And of course, the Kavanaugh vote. Those, I would say, are the three principal things. But keep in mind, too, that tainting the federal courts with right-wing judges for the next 35 years is going to have a huge impact on the politics of Maine and the politics of the country. And she has voted to confirm those judges as put forward by the president, which means the federal courts are now getting packed for a very long period of time indeed. And people don't tend to focus on that problem. It's going to be with us for 3 decades at least.
Thank you.
There's a short way of saying everything Gordon just said, which is that Susan Collins is not independent at all. She's Mitch managed.
Mitch managed?
She is.
You got to say that very carefully. Jackie, as a historian, are you aware of any kind of historical precedent for what's happening with what I see as the Republican Party, which has now become the party of Trump? They don't ever stand up to him. They don't ever disagree with him. And I remember in my lifetime, lots of internal disagreements in both parties, but there's an absolute unity. Is there any historical parallel for that?
I think that what I have focused on through these last few years is that we have moments in American history that are kind of like this or kind of like that, that there are some parallels you can draw between individual scandals, individual crises in our history over the last couple of years with our long history. You can make those parallels, but the full sum of this, no, we haven't had anything like this. There is no time that I can think of where you have the kind of lockstep that you have seen here. And not just, I think what worries me more is not just that the Republicans in Congress are in lockstep with Trump, but that they are so far from a lot of the ordinary Republicans that we have in Maine. I mean, the folks that you run into in the street in the grocery store who are like, what is this? This is not my Republican Party. This is not who I know. And so I think that's the hardest part. And that's why it's so important that we put pressure on Susan Collins to make her accountable. We will do the same for whoever wins this election, but we also use that power so that they hold Trump accountable, because there's no other way that our democracy, our republic works.
Marie, talk about going forward for the next 4.5 weeks or whatever we have left until the bell. What's a plan of action that Mainers for Accountable Leadership are taking, and other people who may not be affiliated with a group like yours can carry on moving forward? I make a few phone calls. I do a few things, but I'm very nervous about what's going to come, and I wish I could be more physically, totally involved in the next month. What do you suggest?
One thing I just want to say is that there is a way that everyone can engage. I manage multiple disabilities and I run Mainers for Accountable Leadership. Everyone is needed in this moment and every action is important. Our focus is getting out the vote. Our focus is ensuring that folks request their absentee ballots. We have phone banks on Monday and Thursday nights that are open. We sometimes text bank. Folks can email us at mfalpack@gmail.com to join our phone banks, or follow us on our Facebook page, or go to the website stopsusan.com. Our phone banks are a joint effort with Be a Hero. And so our focus is very singular there. We know the more votes we get, the stronger the election will be. The second piece is really training. we strongly believe in leadership development with Mainers for Accountable Leadership, whether or not it's offering a training to Lincoln County Indivisible, as we have done in the past, from letters to the editor writing to bird dogging, or around the state. We are stronger when we are prepared. So we will be launching de-escalation and nonviolent direct action trainings that allow us to learn coping skills to relax, chill, calm ourselves in moments of crisis, step back from our feelings, and examine clearly. And I think that that's, one of the biggest things that we all need to learn. And another piece of that is also understanding that when Trump tweets, he wants to rile us up. Understand that we cannot react to every concerned, disappointment statement. We can use the emotional energy we will expend reacting and channel it directly into action. So whether or not it's making 5 calls every time Trump tweets to voters and saying, hey, have you requested your absentee ballot? Have you sent it back? Awesome, great. Then you're being effective. We also have letters to the editor that folks can write. We're here to coach. We can talk about messaging that's effective. Even sharing sign-up sheets and sharing messaging online can be incredibly effective. It's a pandemic. We are more reliant on digital organizing and online messaging than ever before. So that's our focus.
Gordon, as you go about your daily business in your downtown, in your region, among your friends, what is it that what actions do you take that you would not otherwise be taking concerning the election?
Well, I will tell you, Chuck, that I have been doing, I started my political activity many years ago when I was a young boy, not even a man, a young boy, doing straight street political activity. We're handing out leaflets, urging people to vote, handing people literature for presidential candidates way back in the 1950s, making phone calls, setting up phone banks, doing all of these things. And I went from that some years later to being a Washington guy who lived and worked in Washington, D.C. And as you probably know, Washington, D.C. has a local government, but it doesn't really have a federal delegation of any effectiveness. So grassroots politics is not quite the same in Washington, D.C. as it is elsewhere. So one of the things I've enjoyed about coming back here that is now hard to do is the face-to-face grassroots, get out the vote challenge, getting signs to people's lawns, getting them to commit to vote, making sure they've got their absentee ballot. And of course, it's challenging to do now because I can't really walk around town and knock on doors. That's, we're facing a major healthcare crisis, which makes it almost impossible to do grassroots politics. So one of the things that I've enjoyed about what we've done at Mainers for Accountable Leadership is to get on the phone and in the texting and in the social media and cutting ads. I went down to our Maine mall here in Brunswick about a month ago and literally cut an ad in the grass, taking my mask off, making sure the camera crew was a good 10 feet away so that it could be posted on social media because that's now the vehicle for getting to the voters. The vehicle to getting to the voters is phoning, is texting, is phone banking, is the social media outreach, is the Facebook, is the Twitter. It's all those handles that didn't exist when I was doing my grassroots efforts as a young boy that are now the focus of what we're doing. And so I've been a beneficiary of Marie's training, among other people, for doing this kind of outreach to people because I can't do demos and I can't walk the street and knock on doors. So it's in the virtual universe pretty much that I do this thing. And I just want to reiterate a point that Marie made, which I think is really, really important to people. And boy, if you don't get it by now, you haven't been following the traffic. Get out the vote is everything this year. It is everything. Yeah. This election, whether it's, your local town council, Susan Collins, getting rid of her, or the federal level, getting rid of Donald Trump, the whole secret now in a situation where you can't go out and walk the street and knock on doors is getting out the vote. And it's going to be challenging because of COVID. So it means making sure that people ask for their absentee ballots, making sure they send their absentee ballot back in, making sure there are people watching the results so that they can bring challenges where results are being fooled with, because the White House has made it perfectly clear, especially 24 hours ago from this conversation, that they are prepared to fiddle and diddle with this vote and make sure that the results come out the way they want. And they're going to do it by denying people's votes, by suppressing the votes, by challenging people's votes, by throwing out ballots, by sticking their nose in places where, you know, people have feared to go for decades in the voting process. And it's riddled with weaknesses that make it possible for this administration to try to steal their way back into office. So vigilance is going to be a big part of the exercise here, and that vigilance is going to have to go beyond November 3rd, because there's every possibility that the vote counting itself will go beyond November 3rd because of the nature of the ballots, the absentee ballots, the huge impact that that's going to have. So we're heading for an election campaign, like Jackie said, like I've never seen in my life. We got a confluence of things that make this the most challenging election, and we have an administration in the White House reaching for authoritarianism, unchecked by the Republican Party that Susan Collins belongs to, that is going to have to be monitored because they are going to do everything they can to steal the election. I've never seen that before, and I have to tell you, I've worked on, in some way, every presidential campaign since 1952.
Wow. Marie, do you see impact in your efforts and the efforts of other groups like Mainers for Accountable Leadership are affecting also the down ticket races like the state Senate and the legislature and local races? Do you see impact there from what's going on the national scene, or are those sort of separate?
In terms of our mission, they're separate. In terms of the need for down ballot candidates to make the call for every vote to be counted, we cannot separate them. Yeah. We will need every candidate ensuring that this election is protected. This is, as Gordon told us many years ago, this is not normal. It will not be normal. We have normalized it in many ways by participating in a system that's inherently flawed and that does not have correct checks and balances. We will make sure that the people's wishes are protected and listened to.
I feel, as I'm looking at the campaign season overall, I feel that local Republicans are getting a pass, because they don't have to either defend or repudiate the Trump agenda. And I think they should have to do that. I think that Democratic candidates should be forcing their opponents in the Republican Party to say, yes, I'm fine with kids in cages. Yes, I'm fine with getting rid of Social Security. Yes, I'm fine with destroying the post office. Or no, I'm not. And I wish that process had started months ago, because then they would have problems in their own party, and it would be a more interesting set of races. But I just don't get it, that people, I see more Trump signs than Biden signs. I see more Collins signs than Gideon signs. And all those people, I want to go to every one of those houses and say, are you really okay with the immigration policies? Are you really okay with grab them by the, all those things? I don't think they should be allowed to get a pass on that. What do you think? I'll go to Jackie.
Well, I want to emphasize what Marie said. Our focus is on the federal four, and that's where our energy goes. If you really want to know what has happened and how people are responding to the Republican Party up and down the ballot, look at what happened in 2018. Because that was not a message that we were focused on as MFAL, but people heard it loud and clear. Either you affiliate yourself with Trump and his message and his way of doing things, or you reject that entirely. And I think that that's what we're going to see now, which is why, going back to Gordon's point, what we're trying to emphasize right now is everybody, every American citizen should be allowed to vote. Every vote should and must be counted. And this is going to be a very different election and a very different election season than we've had before. Our joke with my joke with Marie lately is move over pumpkin spice, because this is now election season. We don't have a day anymore. It's a whole season. It's starting already, started in August, and we're going through January here, because this is going to be slow. And I think perhaps maybe the one of the good things that COVID has brought us is a little extra patience. We know that everything takes longer now. So let's acknowledge this is going to take a while, and just sit back and make sure that the results are that they come in, that they are ratified, that every vote gets counted before everybody rushes to, well, so-and-so was the winner on election night. There is no election night anymore. We don't have that.
Amen. We're down to our last minute and a half. So what I'd ask you each to do, or starting with Gordon, is to sort of wrap up in 30 seconds what you want to see happen and what you're going to make sure that you do your best at making happen. And that will help all of us who are paying attention but not quite sure about every step of the way. Gordon, how do you want to wrap up this month and this show?
Yeah, Chuck, you said earlier that you were looking for Republicans to step up, and I think that's an important element, particularly in the state of Maine. Maine has a lot of voters who don't make up their minds for a long time, or voters who consider themselves one party or the other, but relatively independent, or people who consider themselves just plain independent. I believe it's really time for all of them to step up to this challenge. And I would urge everybody from the senatorial level on down to be prepared to do something that I did yesterday, which was sign on to a letter of nearly 500 national security officials, including hundreds of former military personnel, all of whom were endorsing Joe Biden, the voices that need to step up and declare themselves with respect to this Republican Party and this White House is real important, especially here in Maine. So what I think needs to happen here in Maine is for suburban women, independent voters, moderate Republicans, and Democrats all to step up to this challenge, vote out Susan Collins, and vote out Donald Trump.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm afraid we've run out of time. What I'd like to do is give Marie a quick last word, and then I want to thank you all three for having come, and I wish we had taken an hour to do this show if we could. Marie.
This movement needs all of us. Everyone has a way to participate. So we need you to show up now, or we stand the chance of losing our democracy. I promise you, we will fight like hell, but we need every organization, every person lining up to work together in a way that you have never imagined. This is not just about voting someone out or stopping Susan. This is about the future of our country and believing in life, liberty, justice, and pursuit of happiness for all.
Well, thank you very much, Marie Folliter. Jackie, I'm sorry we didn't get your closing statement, but we appreciate your input very much. And Gordon Adams, thank you for being part of this Mainers for Accountable Leadership on Lincoln County Indivisible Maine Challenge. Thank you all. Go vote.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.